Welcome to A Deadly Silence. I'm your host, Larry Curtis, and it is the goal of all of us associated with our program to bring you current and educational information concerning the alcohol and drug epidemic issues not only here in the city of Brockton, but throughout our South Shore community. Today, our guest is Matt Ganem. Matt, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Matt is a recovering addict. He is also an author and a poet who has actually written a book called The Shadows of an Addict. Matt, let's start off on the positive aspects. Tell us a little bit about the book.
The book is a collection of poems that are heavily based on addiction, whether it's being in the process of getting high or overcoming it. I've been clean now 7.5 years, and
congratulations.
Thank you. And one of the biggest things when I got clean, as a way to cope with some of the day-to-day struggles that you have being clean, I started writing poetry, and then it ended up getting put into a book somehow, some way. Dealing with all the stuff. You deal with a lot of emotions when you're getting clean. When you're getting high, I got high to numb out, whether it's love or hate. I just didn't want to feel. I wanted to just be numb, and
so what was happening within your life, it wasn't feeling good, and somehow the drug basically became an aphrodisiac for you, and you just kind of zoned out.
I mean, it spiraled out of control long before that. I mean, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it started out, being at a party, splitting an Oxycontin with a couple friends, and when you do it in groups of your peers and it's acceptable, you're kind of more in tune to do it. In settings like that. And when I first started doing oxys, you didn't see the end result down the road of I'm going to be homeless, I'm going to be a heroin addict, I'm going to be using needles and sharing needles and stuff like that. I mean, because you have a good time doing it, you're doing it, everybody has smiles when you first start taking it. It's a great feeling.
So your first experiment with an Oxycontin was in a group setting with friends, and it just felt like the right thing to do? Was it a peer pressure issue?
Yeah. Everybody wants to be accepted.
Yeah.
And, when you're in a group and you see everybody kind of doing something, it's not necessarily they pressure you into it as, my friends are doing it. I don't want to be the only one that doesn't, You don't want to be
the outcast.
Yeah.
And the black sheep of the family, so to speak. Right. Mm-hmm.
So, I ended up deciding to go along with the rest of my friends, and I snorted that first line. Prior
to making that decision, did you have
other... Yeah, I mean, I used other drugs. I mean, a lot of times you say you started with Oxycontin, but, I mean, I was doing ecstasy, acid, and K long before I did my first OC. So it wasn't...
So how young were you when you started to dabble in the different types of drugs?
I was a freshman. Freshman
in high school?
Summer before freshman year, I started getting into... I smoked weed and drank before that, but going into my freshman year in high school is when I think the first time I took acid and ecstasy.
Okay. And was that a similar issue with the people you were hanging around with? They were, buddies
I wasn't really hanging out with the best group of friends.
Okay, all right. So, all right. Mm-hmm. So as you progressed in your experimentation, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Once I did an oxy, it was over though. Like I fell in love with the feeling.
When did you do your first oxy?
I was 16.
So a year later.
2 years later.
2 years later. Okay. Yeah. All right. And at that point,
in the poetry that I write, I kind of use it as a metaphor of a female, and it was like my first love, and it was love at first sight. The first time I ever did it, the feeling, it just made you feel like you were invincible. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know. It kind of took off from there. When you originally do it, you don't realize what's going to happen, but Oxycontin led me to, I was thrown out of my mother's house because she couldn't handle me. I was bouncing from couch to couch. I'm a convicted felon. Arrests, homelessness, the progression from Oxycontin into, snorting heroin, and then when that isn't enough, you start shooting, using IV needles and stuff like that, and then on top of it goes to cocaine, crack, and all that lovely stuff.
One of the things that we try to do with our program here is that we try to focus on the symptoms of the addict, basically in relationship to the loved ones. You know, the family members, mothers, brothers, sisters, whatever it might, fathers, whatever it might be. Can you share with our audience, kind of what evolved with you emotionally, physically, as you graduated in your addiction to heroin, basically. You know.
Towards my loved ones, I would manipulate you in any way possible. I would take your love for me and use it against you, whether it was to borrow money, to steal from you, use your roof to sleep, make any excuse to get a couple dollars. Oh, I need clothes, or I have this fine, I have this guy after me that I need to pay back, can I borrow some money? You know, you become detached because the only thing you care about is getting high.
It's getting high, chasing the high.
Chasing the high. And, you know, I didn't really care about the pain that you inflict on, you know, on my mother, on my father, on my sister, on any of the friends that weren't involved, because, you know, you start growing away from people and going more towards the drug culture than people who aren't doing it.
Yeah.
You know, you
So
surround
you're
yourself.
chasing the high, nothing else in the world, there's no care for nothing in the world.
Nothing in the world mattered to
Just
me.
how am I going to get that
That's
next fix or that
Every
next
single
high,
day it
you know?
turned into is I would wake up and I didn't care what I had to do to get that.
Now they say, kind of somewhat in the drug community, that you know that initial high, that euphoria that you feel the first time you get hooked on it is you're chasing that.
It's never as good as that
It's
first
never
time.
as good as the.
Or you know, you sit there and you think, you know, how great the first time was,
Right.
and it probably wasn't even that good. You know, you
But
trick yourself into
just-
thinking like, oh, the first
Yeah.
time was amazing, and you want to recreate that every time you get high, or the amounts that you do is to get back to that first time that you think, you know,
So
you
the
remember it feeling
So
amazing.
the transition from the oxys to basically the heroin is a transition because basically of economics.
That's exactly what it is.
You know. So tell us about that. You know.
so-
For you know.
So
how
with
that happens.
OxyContin, when I was doing them, the price ended up jumping to $80 a pill. And when you need to do 2, 3, 4, 5 pills a day,
That's what your body's craving.
That's your
right.
tolerance, your dependency on it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you know, I'm curled up like a baby because the sickness, you know, it affects you like that. So when you're putting up $400, $500 a day to get something, doing, you know, committing criminal activities, manipulating people for money, all that stuff, when somebody hands you a $40 bag when you're sick, and that $40 bag that you can split and takes away the sickness that you feel, all of a sudden the $500 or the $40, it's just, you know, it's common sense.
Yeah. Right.
And then at first, you know, when you start doing dope, it lasts longer because, you know, you're developing a tolerance to heroin instead of the oxys.
Right.
So it starts off cheaper, but I mean, eventually you end up
pushing
spending.
more and more every day.
The dependence
Yeah.
grows with heroin too. So
Okay. So as a high school kid, basically, you're dabbling in the different types of drugs that are out there. Did you finish high school?
yes, I did.
You did.
4 high schools in 2 states.
4 high schools in 2 states.
Yeah, quality kid.
Were you expelled from the high schools?
I got expelled a couple times.
Right,
from,
because of the
from
behavioral
activities.
issues associated.
Everything related, you know,
Yeah.
one way or another to what I was doing.
Okay. After high school, were there any aspirations to go on to
No, I didn't.
further your
I didn't-
education?
No.
You were
I
just
didn't really fit into the classroom scene. When I got out, I was basically just, you know, running amok.
running amok. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned some criminal activity or being a felon. Share with our audience what.
I was arrested for selling heroin. I had an apartment that the OC task force raided. After I got arrested, I used to sell this to support my habit or whatever.
I think, yeah.
You know, opportunities present themselves when you can't afford something. You know, I didn't sell to make money. It was just to not be sick. And I got arrested selling heroin in a school zone that I could have reached my hand out and touched the school. And after that arrest, I was kind of like the bottom of the barrel. I'll do anything to get high. And I mean, I don't want to really put out things you do, but I mean, whether it was rob, steal, deal, manipulate people, whether I had to, you know, if somebody wanted a bag, I would make them get me a bag. You know, if you have the connect, there's a bunch of different ways that you can, you know, you can hustle up something to use. But in that process, I was on trial for selling H. I got arrested a bunch of times for, you know, petty thefts, for you know, using in public bathrooms.
B&Es, things like that, breaking and entering.
Breaking and entries. I got arrested. I did 30 days in Bridgewater, and I was out for an hour, and I got arrested at a Kmart in a bathroom.
Wow.
And I went up to Bill Ricker, and I had friends up there that were laughing at me because I was in the paper. And even with that humiliation right there, that still didn't stop me at all. Because once I got out of Bill Ricker, I was right back doing the same thing.
Okay. So all this is happening after high school.
Yeah.
Basically, you're out on your own. You're not living at home.
No.
Okay.
No.
What happened with the family aspects?
Disconnected. You know, you don't want to be nodding out in front of your family, in front of your loved ones. You don't want them to see you like that, unless you're desperate for money and you call them. But
Did you experience that part?
Yeah.
With your family?
Yeah.
All right, okay,
yeah.
so
One of the great things.
bouncing from bed to bed.
Couch to couch. Mm-hmm. And towards the end of my run, I was sleeping head to toe with a buddy of mine at his mother's house, and I used to pay rent and dope. So when I would pull a score, I would come back and I would give his mother, some heroin, and that's why she let me stay there. Mm-hmm. But going back to my father showed up at every single court date, no matter what I did to him, whatever the amount of money that I sucked him dry for. I remember sitting in shackles every court date, and he would show up. He wouldn't talk to me, but he would show up in court, and he was there for me, and that support was something.
You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you
didn't appreciate it at the time.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, when you're sitting there in shackles and you're facing the judge, and your father's there, and he's not happy with you. Like no parent wants to raise a heroin addict, nor do we want to grow up and be a heroin addict. But I remember sitting in court facing the judge.
And that was
my father would be there, and I would see him, and I would just put my head down, hands, shackles to your feet, and just like, man, I'm a loser.
Yeah, but it was an important piece for the recovery aspect to recall back on.
Yeah, absolutely, and that meant the world to me. And at the time, you don't think of it. Now, after the process of getting clean, like I went through detox, into a halfway house, into a sober house. Once you reflect on some of the things that got you that pushed you into getting clean, that was something that was huge, to know that he was always in my corner no matter how bad I screwed up.
Any of your poems are reflecting that aspect of your love for your dad, or your dad's love for you, in essence?
I mean, there's some apologies.
Okay,
definitely some apologies. Mm-hmm. We have a combative relationship at times. Even now.
What parents don't with kids today. I mean, at least from the kid's point of view. Let's put it that way. The parent's point of view is that you're still my kid. You should be listening to me.
Exactly. He knows best.
Yeah.
I don't know a thing in his eyes. So.
And you didn't help him.
No. I did not help him.
Yeah, you didn't help him to change that perspective from there at all. So after you graduated high school, you're out on your own, and obviously you're getting deeper and deeper sucked into the.
I mean, there was a main turning point in my addiction. I was pretty bad with oxys, but I wouldn't have admitted it to people. I lost a friend of mine to suicide, and I was sleeping on his couch, so I took him down from where he hung himself, and that kind of spiraled me into I didn't really care about life after, and trying to cope with some of the post-traumatic stress of it, and. After that, that's when the major progression from Oxycontin to heroin, came right after that, because I was trying to block out so much different emotions, different things that happen, and when you experience something like that, it was my best friend, and he was there. I took him down from where he hung himself, and I kind of really did
Any
not
signs
care about
that
life.
he was suicidal?
He had used, he was a drug addict too,
right.
So I mean. You kind of are who you hang around with.
Yeah.
But he didn't, there wasn't any signs to it.
That he was going to go out that night?
I was in his house when it happened. I said goodnight to him. He went to his bedroom, and I fell asleep on the couch, and I woke up to his mother screaming. Mm-hmm. So.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's got to be very traumatic, and that just spun you out of control.
Yeah, I didn't really care.
Deeper,
I didn't really care about anything.
Okay. So what triggered you to turn the page to recovery?
So, Towards the end of my last run, I was shooting up to not wake up, because I didn't want to live anymore. Okay. And I remember I was dope sick for about 2 days. I was sitting on that futon, and I was looking at my buddy's mother, who was loading up to get high. And she turned to me and she was like, "You're an effing loser. You need to go get some help." And I got up from the futon. I went in the bathroom. That was a shared bathroom. We had a hot plate. It was one room. That was it. And I remember I looked in the mirror, and I couldn't recognize who was looking back at me, and I was like, I'm either gonna die or I need to get some help. And that pushed me, that was like my moment of clarity that I needed to stop this life because I wasn't gonna make it out.
So you realize this, what did you do next?
I went into a detox, and from the detox, I went to a halfway house, the Hamilton House in Dorchester. And I remember I didn't go to a hold-in. I didn't know you had to go to a hold-in in between. So I showed up for my interview about a week after I got out of detox. I had a bag of clothes with me. And the guy that ran the house walks by when he came into work or whatever, and he's like, what dumb, any curse word you want to, use, brought his bag. This isn't a hotel, said everything, in the world bad about me. Made me sit in this chair for like 2 hours before he even had the interview. So he pulls me into his office. Now I went through a bunch of different detoxes. Both my parents don't live in, they moved away from Massachusetts. I didn't really have any family. I didn't have anywhere to go. So the guy turns to me and he's like, what are you gonna do if you leave here? And I was like, I'm gonna go get high. Like, this is my one chance of recovery or whatever. And so he ends up sending me back to the table, and it was like, I don't know, 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock after the interview. I sat there for 6 more hours, and after sitting at that table for 6 hours, the guy realized that I really wanted to get clean. Because if the second I left, I was going off and I was running and I was gonna go use. And he ended up bringing me a pillow and a blanket and gave me a bed. And that was huge because it got me into a recovery. It got me into the home. He also does classes on addiction, which I learned a lot from. And he put the structure back in my life that I needed. When I was running the streets, you don't really have structure in your life. And we had to be in at a certain time. We had to get a job. You had to pay. You had to be a normal person in society, not somebody just causing a ruckus.
Contributing to society,
exactly.
not a hindrance to society, so to speak. From
exactly.
That so you've got, you hit rock bottom when you looked in the mirror.
Yeah.
You realized you need to help yourself. And the only person who was going to help yourself was you.
Yeah. Nobody can do it for you.
And you did your detox. You got into this home by the grace of God.
Yeah.
And you've been clean 7 years now?
7.5. Coming up on 8 in April.
Coming on 8 in April. Okay. So what steps do you utilize now to, you talk about your poetry, when your anxiety gets up or the desire to do something.
Poetry is like, or writing in general. It's a big form of self-expression for me, and it's, it's my release. So when I have a bad day, I go write about it. And they tell you to never forget where you came from, because, you'll start fantasizing that whole thing about the first time you get high and how great it was. Well, we start remembering about when you're using how great the feeling is when it's actually terrible. You sit on a corner waiting for a drug dealer for 3 hours who tells you I'll be there in 5 minutes. You have no friends, you have no family. I stayed in the same clothes for days because I didn't care how I dressed. Like, you don't remember all the bad things, you only remember, the high that you think is this great feeling. And what I do is I write about it. And that's the way.
I like this little 2-sentence page here that this book is dedicated to those without a voice, trapped in the grip of addiction, for those that still suffer from the disease, that would be a recovering, as well as somebody that's currently still addicted, been affected by it, or are in recovery from it. So this covers a lot of ground, when you're looking at it, that it's dedicated to anybody or everybody that's been
Well, I mean, a lot of people don't talk out about it, and that's what I try to do. Not only do I have the book, but I go around and I speak. I perform all over Boston. I speak at different programs, detoxes, hold-ins, high schools, colleges. I just share my experience, and I do it through an art form, through poetry, through spoken word. And I try to give it a voice or a face. It could be anybody. It doesn't matter, what color you are, what social class you're in, if you like, your sexual preference. There's no bias to addiction. It can affect anybody and everybody. So, I think people
doesn't discriminate. Takes all comers.
Anybody. So I try to speak. I want to speak out and also give some people some hope, because I got clean when I was 21 years old. And when I got into the house, everybody told you repeatedly, you're gonna be back here. You're gonna relapse 4 times. You're gonna go back to jail. You're gonna go do this. You're never gonna make it. Like, the statistics are so against us. And I try to put out some positive, positive, like, hey, I can do it. You can do it. There's nothing that says that you can't do it.
Right. So let's talk about sharing the message. The success of a recovery. And although there's never a success because you're always at risk. From that perspective there. But what do you see out there when you're talking to the different groups out there? What's your audience?
The audience?
Are they young, men, women?
Wide range. The audience is different. You'd be surprised because it's not just the addicts that I'll touch. I'll speak at a different place and I'll have somebody's father come up to me and say, you know, thank you for shining some hope. My son's an addict. And it's people that you would, you know, everybody knows an addict. Everybody, you know, the day and age, we live in Boston, which is one of, you know, it's the highest per capita opiate addiction place in the country. Everybody knows an addict. And it affects everybody because me, you know, when I got high, I always thought it had just affected me. You don't realize the surrounding people, your friends, your family, your loved ones, the effect that you bring on them. The audience, I mean, it's really all different. I open eyes to people who might be a little naive to it, and then I'll go to a detox. And the way I come, you know, my words are different than just explaining a story. I'm, you know, telling a specific story, or I'm using, you know, the self-expression part of it. A lot of people can relate to it because you can take my name out of each poem or when I'm performing a piece, and you could put another addict's name in, and it's their story. Because a lot of us have similar stories, just different places, different people, and different things.
I'm looking at your shirt. It's cross, date of birth, date of passing, I'm assuming.
A good friend of mine.
Steven and Pacheco.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Steve, we got clean around the same time together, and he was the Chico charm. He you know, he really had this great aura about him, you know, and he really helped me through a lot of my hard times because in our group of friends we had similar stories being heroin addicts, where not everybody can understand, you know, the lows that you go when you're using, and he, you know, we definitely leaned on each other whenever we were having hard days.
So from the similar experiences with the group and the peers that you hung with that ended up getting you addicted, now that you're in a recovery mode,
we're different. We're different. We're hanging with different
similar
groups
setting,
of people,
but
it's just, you know, we just had that close
common goal of recovery. And
exactly. But he was amazing. I have a son. Before he was born, it was supposed to be a girl, and he was the only one to help me paint her room. He had worked with me before he got into the sheet metal union. Right before that, he was working with me. He was you know, he was just a great guy. And this is the sickness. It doesn't matter how long you've been clean or who you are. It takes some really, really good people.
So in a certain extent, what we're potentially looking at here is that here you are, one of the blessed and fortunate, lucky individuals for 7 years now who's been in recovery, and yet you had a very close friend going through the same process with you, unfortunately
he didn't make it.
Relapsed and overdosed.
And that's why I know I'm lucky, because not everybody makes it out. And, you know, that's another reason why I don't, you know, I don't want to let them down, because I've lost a lot of close friends to this disease, and I feel like, you know, one of the driving forces that pushes me to stay clean and to reach out is, first off, to keep them alive, because everything I do, the book's dedicated to them, whether it's Steve Pacheco, Michael Sparks, or my boy James Slattery, like real close friends of mine. I try to, you know, have them involved in anything I do, and to keep their memory alive, so they didn't die without a reason, that they can be, you know, the example, like, hey, you do not want to end up like that, because anytime, you know, Steve had everything going for him when he relapsed, and that's just how quickly the disease can come back. And it can happen to me tomorrow. I don't know where I'm going to be.
Correct.
So I live in this moment. I don't, you know, you never know what's going to happen.
What would you say to the parents or the loved ones of an addict, you know, in relationship to helping the addict on the road to recovery? You know?
Don't give any money. Be there for support.
Don't enable.
Don't enable. You got it at a point.
And what are the signs?
You have to recognize that. You can't, you know, and it's tough because when somebody first gets into recovery, they might need some help. So if somebody needs clothes, buy the clothes. Don't hand them cash, because when you have cash in your hands and you have bad thoughts and, you know, nothing good happens. But show support. And, you know, sometimes people trip on their path, and just be there to help lift them up. But one thing I try to tell parents when I talk to them is don't enable, don't give any money, and just be supportive. Remind them that you love them. But one thing you can't do is you're going to destroy yourself trying to create their recovery for them if they don't want it. because you have to want to get clean.
And that's a real difficult line for the parent to understand, particularly. I mean, I'm a parent of two recovering addicts today, and that fine line of helping versus enabling is very blurred when you're the parent. And there are great organizations out there like Learn to Cope. That loved ones should go to be with, again, the peers of loved ones of addicts, so that they can share and bond with each other as to
strength in numbers.
Strength in numbers, exactly.
And
from that perspective.
And to know that you're not alone, because a lot of parents, they feel like it's only their child when a lot of people are going through it, and that's what some of those groups really help. And I've actually spoke at the Brockton Learn to Cope group.
Great.
Bunch of amazing people in there.
They're fantastic people out there. Great program out there. What would you say to an addict today?
Have faith in yourself. Things will get better if you give it a chance. Really just believe in yourself, because a lot of times there's like a fear to get clean, or you just don't think you can do it. And if you give yourself a chance and you have a little faith, because too often we take the easy way out. That's what getting high is. It's instant gratification. When whatever way you get high, you're high that instant. When you're getting clean, it's a process, and it takes, time, and then there is going to be bumps, and there's going to be bad days, and, it's just the reaction. You might have a couple days under your belt of being clean, and you might hit a bump in the road, and a lot of times we just run right back to getting high instead of trying to face whatever the issue is and trying to move forward. But a lot of times, it really is just believing yourself.
Yeah. Any passage in here that you like the best, or
it's not in there, but I can say a piece.
Share it with us.
I'm the surface of a sleepless ocean, the cold depths of frozen emotion. I'm pieces of a heart broken, floating inside of love that was stolen. I'm written poetry spoken. I'm a fresh page with a mind full of things to say, reminiscing on yesterday's best days to get the stress away. Even if I'm depressed today, I'm that feeling inside when you look your lover in the eye that no other person alive could provide. I'm the sun setting on a crimson sky. I'm trapped inside these speakers, turning naysayers into believers. When the poem gets deeper, I'm the teacher, abusing the fact that I have the platform to reach you. I'm lost in the wind, a breeze that will never come across you again. Brought up in Boston, boxed in the problems of coming up from the bottom where rising is the only option. I'm the beautiful ugly, a recovering junkie, making barely enough money to keep a roof over me and my son that loves me, and I refuse to let him go hungry because my past has come back to crush me. I'm that first breath of freedom. Breathe in the 1,000 reasons, leaving a cell block of demons screaming freedom like you just left work for the weekend. Only the work week lasted for 5 years. Borrowed time will make you see clear as you watch your youth disappear. You learn the truth when you're in here. Only your true friends will be there when you breathe free air. I'm the rebirth of Pak Poe and Shakespeare. I'm the rose that grew from concrete, the thump beneath the street where Romeo and Juliet would meet. I'm the madness created from the telltale heartbeat. I'm Achilles at war, but my pen is my sword, using the allure of everything I went through before as a metaphor that you don't have to struggle anymore. I'm that morning light, after making it through a night that might have taken your life when there was nothing but darkness in sight. But you found the strength to fight, because the sun shines bright. Once you believe, everything will be all right. I'm the last words that a poet writes. I'm the skies telling the story of my past that reminds me of what I see when I'm looking back. Similes didn't have the impact of half of that, so I literally mapped out the path from where I was at. I'm chaos finding serenity, the point beyond infinity, taking what's given to me so I can build from within my city. I even pray for my enemies, because once upon a time they were a friend to me, regardless if they see it differently. I'm trying to make history. I'm a legend. Or so I've been told by my friends that made it to heaven. As a penman, I'm the extension of their resurrection, redemption. For anyone abusing prescription medicine whose progression led them to heroin, that settle in. I'm the voice of a generation, raising my voice to the nation. Inspiration for every addict getting high in the basement or kid trying to get clean as a detox patient, that they can say, I am one of the ones that made it. I am hope for those that lost it, still carrying pieces of broken dreams in their pocket, who think happiness is found in material objects. I'm street knowledge. I'm passion, pleasure, and pain. I'm lightning, thunder, and rain. I'm what my mother made in the first day of May. I'm a heroin addict that changed, but couldn't wash away the stains that covered my veins. I'm Matthew Ganem, and you will remember the name.
Matt, thank you for being here on our show. On behalf of all of us at The Deadly Silence, continued success with your recovery.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for watching.